Sat Sri Akal ji, welcome to Doksok. I'm your host, Gurjit Rana, and joining me today, Anita and Avnish.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome to the show.
You're
and
welcome.
Today we're talking about relationships, and you two are both here to help me talk about and explore how to navigate your way through in modern day life.
That's it.
What can we tell the viewers in order to stay tuned and be interested in waiting to find out more about our conversation? What can they learn today?
We've got some hopefully exciting and interesting tips and ideas about how to move your relationship to another level, and looking at some of the challenges and the issues that modern day relationships have. So we've got some of our own experiences and some of the things that we've researched as well.
So that's introducing Avnish and Anita Goyal. We'll talk more about them, and I'll introduce you properly to who they are and what they've been doing. But first of all, maybe you're wondering, it's the first time you've tuned in, that you may not have joined us in series 1, and you're questioning, how has this show come about and who's Gurjit Rana? Doksok was launched last year with the aim of providing clarity, purpose and power to people that were stuck in their lives. And really, we helped you explore and understand what is it you want from your life. I was in a fortunate position as a life coach to give you some of that guidance. I brought in some amazing coaches, and the starting point was really the Wheel of Life. In the Wheel of Life, we helped you explore areas of your life that you wanted to improve. And I brought in some amazing coaches that helped me to explore those areas, to help you understand how you get more from your life. If you've never aware of what a Wheel of Life is, it should have just come up on your screens. And ultimately, you can find one on the internet. It's very easy to do. And it's a rating out of 10 where you can understand right at this very moment, where are you focusing your life? As they say, your energy goes where your attention goes. So if you pull one off, have a go, and all you do out of 10 is rate yourself in the area of each of the areas on the wheel of the quality of life that you've got at this very moment. That begins to show up for you where you're spending most of your time and your energy. And if there's something that you haven't got in your life and you're wondering, well, how do I do that? That will just start to give you some clarity and understanding of where time is being spent and what could you do to release some of that time to focus on an area of your life that perhaps you want more of. And some of those areas, starting with, such as health, are really, really important. So just before we begin our show and topic for today on relationships, I just want to briefly touch upon a charity that's close to my heart, which is called the Goyal Foundation, Giving Hope a Future. This charity is important because it helps people that are looking for donors or stem cell donors to have a hope for their future. Many people that go through things such as leukemia or cancer are left quite weak and will need new cells to replace their body. The Goyal Foundation are hosting an event on the 10th of March at Hitchin Gurdwara, where we're looking for donors to help us increase the awareness for our register and also come along and potentially be a match to help save a life. So I do encourage you to go onto the goyalfoundation.org on their website, where you can get more details. It's going to be a really fun day with Kirtan from Kirtan by Gurjit by Harpreet Singh, and much, much more, including a fun day out for kids with a bouncy castle. So please, Bintia, help save a life, help give somebody a future, help give a family a future, and really hope to see you there on the day. So really important show. So on to the next topic of really today's show, which is all about relationships and how to navigate our way through modern day relationships. So you briefly met them, Avnish and Anita Goyal, and ultimately they're here to help us talk through and understand what we can do to improve our relationships. Just to give you a bit of an understanding about them, so welcome again.
Thank you.
Avnish, starting with yourself, so you're not only an entrepreneur, philanthropist, but you came into personal development some 20 odd years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. I was always encouraged by my uncle to get into personal development, but like a lot of people, didn't really understand what that was. I used to do a lot of reading, but never personal development. It was a completely different concept to me until I read my first book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I was blown away by the the things that were in that book, just some simple ideas of how you can make a difference to yourself and other people, especially in business. And then I read another book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and by Stephen Covey, and it was another level for me. And suddenly that opened up my thinking of there's so much more that I need to know. And eventually a friend of mine, Ravi, encouraged me to go and do a course called the Landmark Forum, which was the next stage, and then Tony Robbins, and then I just became hungry for this kind of work, and then I realised I could also make a difference. And then when I met Anita, obviously, we then took it to a whole nother level.
So when you set up your business, was the aim at that point, were you kind of aware of where your life was heading in terms of perhaps doing some relationship seminars at that point? I know we haven't touched on it just yet, but did you kind of have that view of that's what I want in my life?
No, not at all. I was in a very different life then. I wasn't with Anita then, and so it was a different scenario. But no, I definitely didn't have any vision about doing relationship seminars. I was just navigating my own way in a relationship, so no, definitely not. That's come in the last 6 years since being with Anita.
So Anita, so you met Avnish back in 2013?
That's right, yes, we met, and again I'd been in a very challenging marriage, and I'd done a lot of work on myself because I felt that there was gaps and things that I needed to do to improve myself, and I really did spend some time being on my own from 2011 onwards. And when I met Avnish, I felt I was, kind of ready as I could be in order to get into a really good relationship. And I think what Avnish and I, when we first met, one of the things that we absolutely focused on was our compatibility. And that's been really key, I think, for our whole relationship. So exploring our temperaments, what we're like, and also what our values are. And when there's a match in your values, it makes life so much easier.
So when you, because you're obviously now supporting Avnish and you run these events together, how much joy does it bring in helping transform other people around you when you kind of think about the journey that you yourselves have been on?
So we first started off doing our singles relationships, which were a very interesting space for us to be in because we'd been single and we knew what it was like and the challenges of finding the right person. So through lots of reading and also through Avnish's personal development and also my own personal development journey, we combined all of our learning experiences and our research together in order to do these singles relationships. And then we moved on to the couples relationships, which was again sharing our relationship and how to take everything to the next level. So we've been looking and exploring at lots of different areas within relationships, such as where things can go wrong and where things you can work on and ways you can kind of like navigate your way around some of the issues and challenges that you might have.
But that kind of came as you've kind of gone on the journey, because for you, I know you guys are really kind of at the heart of it is about family, because I know for yourself, Avnish, you set up Anita&AnitaGoyal Foundation in honour of your father.
That's right.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
I think one of the things that I've started to realise about 10 years ago, that as well as the personal development journey that I was on, I had to think about, not had to, but I wanted to think about also the difference I wanted to make, not just with work, and we were making quite a substantial difference there, but to the wider community. And also one of the things a few things, so in terms of children, how do we ground our children to appreciate what they have? And the kind of famous story kind of thing now that we tell in our seminars is when I spoke to my son about, to make, he was having dinner and he hadn't eaten all his food, and I said to him, there are starving children in Ethiopia, in Africa, and you haven't eaten your food. And he said, well, why don't we package it, Dad, and parcel it and send it to the children in Africa? And I realised that the things I was saying were quite nonsensical. There were just things I was repeating I'd heard, and actually I had to think about what I was saying to him. And then I realised, through a number of conversations I had with him, where he really brought me to my senses as a father, because we can learn from our children. There's no point lecturing them, there's no point telling them how lucky they are. What we've got to do is actually show them through giving and through the kind of charitable work that we're doing, how fortunate they are. That's a far better way. And so from that, and also to honour my father who'd passed away many years before, to really honour his name, that we'd set up this foundation in his honour and do all of this, and it's encapsulated all of that. And then obviously since Anita's come on board, she's just taken it to a whole nother level.
So Anita, I know you're the trustee of the charity, of the foundation, and you're heavily involved with like being the international women empowerment, disadvantaged children. How satisfying is that to your world right now?
There's lots of work to do. Firstly, there's so many things that you want to be part of in order to change the world. So some of the charities that we're involved in are examples that you just mentioned there. Binti International, which is a menstrual dignity charity, which I was asked last year to be the patron of, and I was honoured to absolutely accept that.
Excellent.
So I've been involved with Binti, with the CEO Manjit Gill, it's been a phenomenal journey. But this year we're going to India to deliver some menstrual education classes in 5 cities in the north of India, places like Moga, where we're from in Punjab, Chandigarh, Amritsar, and also in Jaipur as well, and a few other areas. So to celebrate 5 years of Binti, 5 cities, 5 schools, to deliver menstrual education, and to really bring that to the attention of people, that we must look and explore like what's happening with dignity of periods and so on.
I think it's so important, and I think that nicely helps us move on to our subject of relationships, because it's these kind of things that we shy away from.
Yes.
That then, as I say, over time they kind of stack up under the carpet, and that's some of the challenges that couples face. Where do these challenges actually stem from? What are the kind of unsaid, or as I call them, hidden truths that we all trying to pretend at home that everything's perfect and hide in relationships?
I think a lot of the challenges that and I can relate that in terms of when I was younger, I got into my first marriage, and obviously that didn't last, and I got divorced. But I didn't have a clue, if I'm honest, about how to select, how to create a great relationship in terms of the things that one should expect before getting married, the kind of ways to select, and the expectations and the level that a relationship should or could be at, because we use role models around us, our parents. And often we talk in our relationship seminars about how many of us would like the same relationship our parents had. And very few people say, yes, my parents had an amazing relationship. Most say, including myself, and I love my parents. Obviously my father passed away many years ago, but they modelled relationships that they saw. But I, from a young age, I was very committed not to do that, but I wasn't very good at selecting. And one of the things that I've seen is that selection is very important to start with, and then to really plan your relationship. You wouldn't start a business without a business plan, but we start relationships, we get into relationships, we fall madly in love, and we get into it, and then we find actually there are incompatibility issues, there are things that we have differences in terms of values and direction, how many children we want, where we want to live, jobs and so on and so forth, and suddenly we find we've drifted apart, we've grown apart, and that's a lot of the challenges. And then how do we go and seek help? How do we go and get support? People struggle, and then eventually the relationship breaks.
But I guess that's the thing, that when people first came together, and if it wasn't done through arranged marriages, it was literally down to attraction, because that's what ultimately people, how they select people is almost, as I call the tick box exercise of going, have you got that? Have you got a great career? Have they got a great family around them, what they perceive as the right family around them? Then they come together, and like you say, and I kind of say as many love marriages as there are arranged marriages that probably go through the same struggles.
Sure.
I know there was a poll by Detsy Bits that actually stated that over a third now of marriages that fall apart are largely down to incompatibility, so differences and intolerances. How much is that now coming to the fore, do you think, than where it was previously just about find the right match?
I think firstly, as often in the past, we look at external things, like you just mentioned there. So things like socioeconomic background, education, religious background, and all these things which are important as well to look at compatibility, because in the long term, with time, they could impact the relationship. So if there is we call them incompatibility time bombs, and they go off with time. And there's just a few of that I've just mentioned there. But what I think is lacking in people is looking at how internally what that person is about, what values they have, what kind of traits do they have, and is there a match there in terms of the internal compatibility. And that's really challenging for people, because I think when you date, you're on your best behaviour. You're always going to be at your best. And it's only until you start to see they start to reveal more and more of themselves. And sometimes people don't fully reveal themselves, and they do keep what their true personality is hidden.
It's like your first impressions, right? So on the first time when you meet someone, like you say, you're on your good behaviour, and then you kind of meet them, eventually get married, and that's when how do you put it, you really get to know people, right? And I guess from there, you know, a lot of our viewers have probably been, you know, in that time zone of going, or what you call the time bumps. What are those, what I call the pressure points of when those begin to show up, or how quickly do they begin to show up?
Well, we've identified them as being red flags. So when somebody looks as if this behaviour actually isn't normal, or there's something not quite right about that. When you're in love, like you say, the first phase of love, you may dismiss it because you're blinded by love, and you may think, actually, no, it's fine, it's fine. I'll just ignore that. That's just, it'll all change, and I will try and change that person, because you may not like something about a particular trait about a person, but you have this kind of like a misconception that, oh, once you get married, or if I give it more time, that person will change. Actually, that's a red flag. It could be showing something that is, it could exaggerate once you are in a committed relationship.
I'd actually say, generally, if the relationship isn't working or not where you want it to be before you get married, don't expect it to become better once marriage occurs. And I think sometimes people live in that falsehood. They are together, it's, you know, convenience now, proximity, and, you know, everyone knows about the relationship, especially in our culture, and you feel almost obliged sometimes to continue with the relationship, whereas there's a nagging feeling behind that, is this right? And you think, oh, don't worry, it'll work. And most times it can, of course, things can change around, but often it will just get worse, because once you're living together, and, you know, we have to deal with the challenges of, should couples cohabit before marriage? I've got my view about that. I can tell you if you want to know what my view is. I don't think, you know, arranged marriages, I'm talking about some of the charity work we do around forced marriages, arranged marriages or love marriages, I'm not sure, I think they're similar. I don't think there's any, you can say arranged marriages versus love marriages are any different. I think once you're in, you then got to work it out. But, you know, there are things, I think, as Anita said, once you're in love, that you can overlook, or even with arranged marriages that you don't know about, and, you know, things like mental health, drug addiction or alcohol addictions, or different value sets. You know, you could be one could be spiritual, the other one may not be. One could be vegetarian, the other one not. Those things can become major issues, as well as, you know, toxic in-laws. That can be a huge problem as well.
Because it's the small things that begin to add up. And I was just going to touch upon the point when you said about cohabiting, or certainly in the dating phases, because we all know now that, you know, kids or the next generation, they're getting the opportunity to know each other for a longer period of time. And despite that, you know, once they get married, it's almost like, oh, it's not the same as what I thought it was when I was dating. So again, there's that false perception going on of what marriage could be or should look like. And let's face it, there's no real given formula, right? That when we watch our parents, and the classic one that I use is, you know, we've been shown how to argue, because we've all watched our parents do it, and viewers will know what I mean here, that, you know, we've all watched our parents argue, but we've never actually seen our parents, you know, make up in the same way, or show that kind of respect or intimacy of going, we're now fine. You just now know when the kind of you know, the fog's gone, kind of got all the red mist, because that's still really, you know, quite a critical way of, you know, how you've argued before you were married, and you, like you say, you kind of pacify it, and kind of for the sake of, oh, I need to go through the marriage, and then once you're in, that's where you kind of go, okay, now what? That's quite challenging for some people, right? Because they kind of go, where do I go for help now? And like you say, that's where some of the symptoms that you refer to, whether it's drinking or drugs or something else, begin to show up, because they're kind of going, what can I do to manage my time or my relationship? Yeah,
and I think there aren't that many role models out there to show people that, and there are manuals, but you don't get given a manual. Most people don't refer to one. You know, there are many self-help books, there's even counselling and things like that. I think can be really beneficial, but most people don't go and seek that. I know people that are very close to me that they struggle often in their relationships, but won't go outside of that. And often, you know, it's from experience of friends and family that these relationships will break often when people won't go and seek help. the stigma and the taboo of people finding out
Yeah.
often stops them doing that.
So since you've been running your relationships, has it been as many Asian people as there has been non-Asian, or?
I think initially it started off as being quite diverse, but we seem to have naturally attracted more of our Asian community, and that's fine as long as we can support and help relationships, whether if it's with Asian community or whether if it's a diverse community. We've accepted that that's totally fine.
But I think it's been often word of mouth. I mean, we're running lots of different seminars, relationship seminars, vision board workshops, and we did an empowerment day at the weekend. We do young leaders seminars. But I think what happens in the Asian community is we enroll others. So what happens is we've got some core people within, they've done the seminars, and they now go and get their friends and their families involved. So that's why I think we've got quite a large Asian contingent in our seminars, because we just go and tell so many others, and then we want to all jump on that bandwagon, which is a good thing.
And how comfortable are they with sharing, or are they only sharing within their couples? Do you get them to share out aloud some of the common challenges, shall we say, that we're all going through?
I think that the challenges are all very similar, no matter which background you're from. I think that there's some real commonalities there. I think the biggest challenge that we come across, or couples have, is how to resolve conflict, and how they get through that, and what kind of strategies that they can use in order to make up and to move on in the relationship, where it would give them a positive resolution. So I think that's one of the things, because we're not actually taught that as a child. We're not taught about how to resolve a fight, an argument, or an upset, and we share our way of doing it, and also what we've discovered from lots of reading and research, and being able to give people the tools that they need in order to have a much better resolution than perhaps before.
What are the three, or if you can share, what are the kind of common triggers that come up that are bringing people to your seminars, or just in general that you think, what, most couples will go through this, because we can all kind of say, yes or no, that was the challenge in our marriage. Some of the ones that I often hear are something to do with, the kids. You're arguing over the kids. Obviously, once they come along. What else do we hear about that?
Well, most commonly there are three reasons for the most stress and strain in a relationship, and that is children, money, and intimacy. And often with intimacy, there could just be a mismatch with both couples and what they want, and also not being able to communicate what they really need. This is a real challenge as well as incompatibility, but not able to say what you actually need, how you need support in the relationship. Women sometimes say to their partner, "You should know what I need. You should know what I want." Well, actually, we find is men don't know. You need to explain that and communicate that very clearly as to what you need. And in other words, you're crystal clear with your partner in a really nice, gentle, compassionate way, and with respect, showing and sharing what you absolutely need. And that way, there's less challenge in the relationship in that particular aspect. But there's with incompatibility and why relationships don't work. There's many reasons which we can talk about now.
Absolutely.
What I say is that you don't have to have a problem to go on a course or read a book. What I'd say is don't wait for a problem. The analogy I often give is that the best time to learn to change the spare wheel on your car is when you're on your drive and it's a sunny day. Don't wait for when you're on the motorway and it's pouring down with rain, as happened to me the other day, funny enough, and I thought about this, because then trying to find all the things and to do it is very, very difficult. So, get your toolbox of ideas beforehand, and then when you face those challenges, you're ready to deal with them. But unfortunately, society's not geared up to go and equip ourselves. When we talk about relationships, the first thing people say to us is, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with my relationship, it's fine." And I say, no, it's not about that. But people are immediately closed down often. But I think the ones that have come have seen there's more that they want. They're craving for the next level. And that's what we encourage people, is like, they don't have to have a problem, don't wait for a problem. But what's possible? What was it like when you first got married, or when you first got together? Why can't it be like that? Plan it that way. People sometimes say, "Oh, well, we've been married 25, 30 years, you wait till you're at our level, but between us we've got 35, 40 years of marriage between us in our previous lives, and now together we've been and we just plan all the time about what we want next. And I've seen, and we've seen our relationship just enhance, get deeper, and I think that's possible for most people.
And is this because, innately, just as we are as human beings or as people, that in the marriage we don't necessarily look at ourselves and kind of think, what can I do to change? We ultimately start from that place of blame, because you did this, and it then becomes a build-up, right, before you kind of get to a point where you go, I now need serious help, because unfortunately too many people have got to that point. We probably have in our first marriages of didn't know any better, shall we say, and even the people around us, they could only show us one model, which is whether it's good or bad, stick it out. And now there's so much more opportunity and choices brought about either through just social media, like you say, more knowledge out there, and more encouragement to actually resolve your problems. So
I want to answer that first, and then you can answer. As a human being and as a guy, I think this probably works both ways. Is the first nature is to blame the other person. And things happen, I want to blame Anita for it. That's just human nature. Then I have to think about, well, if I blame you for something, first of all, is it correct? What will happen because of the consequence of that? Do I really want to hurt your feelings? And then the final one, really, I think, is if I start blaming you for things, the nature is you're going to start wanting to blame me for things. Do I want that? No, I don't. So when you have those kind of understandings, you start to manage yourself. You start to take more responsibility, and you also start to think, is this really important? Am I trying to score points here? Have I built up a stack of things that I want to now take revenge on you for? And then you take revenge back on me. And I think often in relationships you end up in this battle backwards and forwards for power, and and so on, and there's no point. Having been in previous relationships, we totally get that. So we live in a place of gratitude every single day, absolutely, of looking at, not that we don't have disagreements, not that we don't have small fights and skirmishes about things, but we very quickly restore that because we want harmony, we want peace. It doesn't mean we compromise either. We end up reaching higher solutions and resolutions than we would otherwise. I don't know what your thoughts are, Anita.
I know, I think that's great. And the other thing, if I can add to this, is when you are in a conflict, when you've planned for the conflict, when you're in a good state, like you're getting along, you're happy together, and you can say, okay, if we do get into that situation, let's plan for it now, so we're more resourceful when we do get into conflict. And one of the things I find very useful is repair attempts, and I think that's really good, and I think that's taught me a lot, is how often egos can get in the way, and you can say, well, I'm not going to say sorry, I'm not going to make up first
until I get the flowers.
And I think, like, for example, I think a guy, this is generalization what I'm saying here, may offer a repair attempt. Like, it could just be a simple thing like, oh, make me a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or something, and for my job then would be, and I can see this is a repair attempt coming my way. If I reject that, then that will make the other person think, okay, well, she's really not accepting this. And I think if you want to reach a resolution, accept the repair attempts, and that makes it easier for the other person to then come back to you with more repair attempts, and then you can then start to resolve the issues and what's really going on.
Because I think the biggest compassion that you can show is, it's not a sign of weakness, so that's the biggest thing I would say, is it's not a sign of weakness, but it's showing a sign of willingness. Absolutely. It's more humbling for a person to take the first step than it is waiting for an apology. And it's almost like, if you're willing to be open and be collaborative to continue to build on the communication and the rapport, that shows more strength than it shows more vulnerability and going, no, it's my fault, I'm not going to do it, why should I let them off the hook, sort of thing. And that's where, like you say, it's probably doing more damage to the relationship than probably nipping it in the bud, or recognising to kind of go, I now need to do something about this, and appreciate that sometimes it may not even be your fault, and like you say, it's all about that willingness to repair and an attempt to repair, as opposed to not even acknowledging it in the first place. How much do you feel when when you're in that situation, you know, that you can catch yourself being aware of what's going on, even in the middle of the conflict. What can people be doing? You know, is there techniques?
There's a few techniques. But
well, before we do the techniques,
we should do that.
Let me just share something.
Sure.
You know, one thing I've learned in the relationship, when we created these promises to each other, which we never really read now, but they're there, and we know, and I know.
These more than your vows, I take it.
Yeah, these are promises we make to each other.
Wow.
Like, things like we're going to look after each other's family, that we're going to not go to bed on an argument, we're going to hug each other every day, etc., etc. So we've got all these different promises. And one of them, which I said, is never going to go to bed on an argument. So that really resonates with me, because that's been something that I've always wanted and dreamt about, that never to go to bed on an argument. I find it difficult to sleep. And one thing I've done with Anita is that, you know, we've had a little bit of a tiff, and then you're sleeping on ends of the bed, and I'm tossing and turning, and I want to make up, and then, like, well, why do I have to make up all the time, and all this kind of stuff, why me? And then I'll move my leg across and hope that theirs isn't too far and it's the other side, and all those little games that we play. But what I've always done is, you talk about being vulnerable, and eventually thinking, I'm going to give in, I'm going to give up, I'm going to restore this. And what I've noticed with you is that I've continued to do that, and I've brought you back to the middle, and I think it's even now. But I think in terms of when we make up. But I had to be vulnerable there, and keep going, making up. And I think you've respected that, and instead of taking advantage of it and thinking, oh, well, he's always going to make up, why do I need to make up?
Yeah.
You've seen that I'm willing to be vulnerable, willing to, but also with the repair attempt, that if I am in that space, and mostly I would say that you'll immediately give in, or sometimes you need a bit more time, but you know that you're not going to retaliate, you just want a bit more time. I think that's been brilliant as well.
Because that's what often can happen in couples. I mean, it's fantastic to listen about your relationship. I guess some of our viewers may have said, well, I've tried that, and it ends up in an argument again. And is that, again, a power trip that's going on?
Well, we can use that, the concept of the balance of power is a fantastic one to use. I think, Avnish, you explained that one. I love the way you explain balance of power.
Yeah, I mean, it's fairly simple, really. I think in most relationships, there's a struggle of power. And usually it's where the person who values the relationship the least, is how we teach in our seminars, is the one who usually holds the power. It's usually the one who says, well, if you do that again, I'm going to leave you, or if you do that again, I'm going to do this. And not in all relationships, but when you use those kind of words of fatality in a relationship, the other person can panic. They can think, oh my God, I better not do that, or this person's going to leave me. Those kind of start to create those power struggles in a relationship. And it doesn't have to be as severe as that, but so we avoid that, because we know that we're not here to struggle, because when you're struggling, you're pushing and pulling, and that's so much energy wasted. I
was going to say, surely that's unfulfilling for both people, because you've got one person that's on, how do I put it, eggshells and feeling isolated and almost worried about, if I say the next thing, it's going to come out wrong, or she or he may behave like this, and then you've got the other person going, well, I'm not happy because this is not fulfilling. It almost feels like, how do I put it, parent-child relationship going on of some sort.
It can be,
and
we're not taught any of. I mean, where do you get solutions to this? So most of us, including we've been there. You struggle along. You've got this fog or mist, or you're in the jungle and it's all dense, and you're trying to make your way through to work out how to have a great relationship. Most of us don't know how to do it.
And how, if I can ask that question, how is that balance restored so that it's, using my hands, equal or equal footing?
That's a really good question, actually, because is this thinking in that moment, how do I respond, and taking responsibility of what action you're going to take next.
But I think it requires two.
I was going to say, does it require both?
I think it does, because how can you have balance? So if you're on a seesaw, one is pushing down constantly, or not pushing down, just allowing the other person to push down. Then, so you have to have a bit of a push and pull, but you have to recognise, how do you create that, what do you call it, that equilibrium, that balance, where you're not rocking, like I'm using the seesaw analogy here, but of course it's going to gently move up and down, because it can't be static. That's boring as well. So you've got to have a bit of friction, you've got to have a bit of tension, otherwise you're not doing anything in life. But you never get it so frantic that you break the seesaw.
But I guess many, or potentially some of our views, and certainly the clients that come to me, have been in those long-term marriages and have actually stagnated to that point of going, it's just the way of life. And they almost now see their children as fulfilling that area of love that they're missing really from their partner, you know, through the hugs that they're having through their children, for the success that they have with their children. And then they go off, you know, when the children grow up and they've left home, and all of a sudden then they're kind of faced with this person that they're left with, and going, but you weren't the person, and you're not the person I married. You know, so 20, 30 years later, I'm going, who are you?
And you know, that's happening, you know, more and more in the Asian community. It's happening in all communities. But that's where, again, it's how do you not focus just on the children? We have this thing where, and this is again going to shock the viewers, I think, a little bit. Some of them is that the relationship has to go first, not the children. But most couples, and Anita, you probably want to say this from a female perspective. And if you look at the people in the best, strongest long-term relationships where they put each other first, and the children know that this relationship is number one. Not that they don't mean enough or whatever, but the parents are number one. I don't know if you want to share more about that.
I think, yes, I think, you know, children can put a little bit of pressure on a relationship, but I think for a couple, if the couple agrees that actually you and I come first, support each other with the children and raising the children together. But to say, sometimes, for example, you may just want to have like a date night and you've got small children, but yet you haven't got childcare. And we suggest techniques in order for you to do that. So you nourish each other. And it's really important about how you recognise how you nourish each other's soul in a way, and how you're attentive and you're completely engaged with that person. You know, for example, the launch and landing technique is one that I'm sure we'll be talking about a bit later on. But just to add to that, how do you have some habits in your daily routines with each other, so that you're fully connected? It could be at the start of the day, in the evening, even throughout the day. We teach some techniques on how you can remain connected with each other, and there's some very simple, easy things that you can do, as well as communicating effectively with each other and keeping that open, and many other techniques you can use.
Because that's, I guess, the key to this is what I often refer to is the love languages, which I know you guys are quite familiar with, and those that are watching going, what's the love languages? So they're by a gentleman called Gary Chapman. And that is around, you know, how you prefer to be loved, and that's not necessarily how your partner prefers to be loved. So if I was to probably randomly ask you, Anita, what's your love language? Would Avnish know?
He would know, yes, and we're quite fortunate because one of our love languages is the same, which is physical touch. So we feel very fulfilled if it's the same, then it's easier. I mean, you can go and do a quiz. It's on Google. You put in 5 love languages, and you go and then you do a quiz. It takes about 10 minutes, and you will find out what your primary love languages are. And there's 5 different types of love languages. One of them is physical touch. Ours just so happens to be the same in that area, which is great. My other primary love language is quality time. So I love it when Avnish spends quality time with me. That makes me feel really, really loved. And that's how I receive love from Avnish, and he knows that, so he ensures that he's committed to giving me love through spending quality time with me. And with Avnish, I know his love language is, again, physical touch and also acts of service. So doing things for Avnish.
Make me a cup of tea. And I feel loved. I do, you know.
And just supporting you. So, for example, if I can see Avnish has got to get to a meeting, really important, early morning, and I'm up, and I can say, right, how can I make your day better? What can I do to support you? And, you know, it could be those physical things like get your briefcase, even making breakfast, whatever they might be. And Avnish does the same back for me. So it's not that this is in any way a traditional relationship. We support each other. We recognise that one partner needs more support. If we're getting late for anything, Avnish will always say to me, Anita, what can I do to help you? And it'll be, and I then read off the list.
What did I get you this morning?
You got me you made the bed.
Yeah,
that's great. That's supporting.
And I got cereal.
That's important.
And I got cereal.
Just me, I felt loved and I felt respected and I felt, wow, you know, this is special for me. And these are the small, tiniest of things that can make the biggest difference, I think.
And the other 2 that acts are words of affirmation. So in other words, how you speak to each other and what you tell each other daily. And remind me again, I think the other one is gifts. That's
Gifts,
it, gifts.
yeah.
So the things that you like giving, and you know, in our dating world, I guess that becomes ranked slightly higher of going, oh, he got me this. But you know, when you get married, then you stop getting the gifts, and it's how you're conditioning your partner, and that's where that conflict comes, or that expectation, which is, you know, I usually get flowers and I don't get flowers every week, or I don't get chocolates, and that's what kind of, you know, you hold on to, I guess, is the past to almost kind of be the future that you want. And I, you know, now with clients kind of say, well, no, because that person didn't exist in the first place. You know, that was what you want, what I call the princess fairy tale story.
Yes.
And that's not reality.
Can I add in there? I mean, obviously the viewers can do the love languages quiz. Just Google love languages and you'll see the quiz there, and you can just do that, and then you'll see what each other's love languages are. But what we end up doing is we end up doing the love language that we want, how we want to be loved.
That's it.
We do that onto the other person, hoping that they will see that we love them. And the clue is, if your partner says to you, but you know, when you get in that fight and you say, of course I love you, and your partner says, no, if you loved me you would do this, that's a big clue that you're probably not meeting their love language. You probably are loving them the way that you'd like to be loved, but you're missing out on the way that they'd like to be loved. So they may want words of affirmation, and you do acts of service. So you might make them a cup of tea because you like that, but actually what they want to hear is I love you.
Absolutely. How many
Right.
women will turn around and say, I just want you to say it now, and you're
Or-
like, I've told you last week.
that you're great, or that you look great, or you know, that you're enough, or whatever it might be. So it is that, and you keep doing it and keep getting frustrated. You're saying, but of course I love you, of course I love you, and you're missing that. So that book or in that quiz really gives you good insight. We're fortunate actually in some ways that, like, physical touch is this, we're the same, so we don't have to think about, in that respect, doing it to each other because it's natural. But you know, that doesn't stop you doing stuff to each other.
What would you say to couples that, I guess, what I call, like you've mentioned, is it habits that have, you know, they're long ingrained now, and you may think, well, look, I've been married for 20, 30 odd years, I'm not about to change, and we've talked about that in the sense of, look, it's going to require two of you. But even if your partner's unwilling at this stage, is it a journey that you can take on your own? Because ultimately you're improving a relationship within you, as I say, and then your world begins to change around you. But do you have that where actually there's an opportunity there for people to still learn and still grow and change their relationship on their own, if that makes sense, even if the other partner's not willing? Or would you think that only gets you to a certain point?
I think it depends on where you are and where you'd like to be, and how much your partner is willing to change. I think you're absolutely right, Gurjit, that if you want change in someone else, you have to be that change. There's obviously the famous quote, "Be the change that you want to see in the world," Mahatma Gandhi. And I think that does make a difference, because if you are being this amazing person, not having ego, or being vulnerable, you can have impact on the other person for sure. But and it depends on the golf. It won't work in all cases, because if that person is not willing to see that change, not willing to go on that same journey with you, and we talked about all the different incompatibilities that can be there, lack of integrity, addictions, mental health issues, toxic parents, and that kind of stuff, or in-laws, they can be big barriers.
Yeah.
But I think, before one thinks about, well, this person isn't right for me, I need to go and change my relationship, get a divorce, whatever, is to work on oneself.
Absolutely.
And that's what I spent a long time doing in my previous kind of life, is to really focus on myself. I did seminars, I read books, I got coaching, eventually realised I was in the wrong relationship. I was being told by my wife then was that, we're incompatible, and I couldn't hear it. I couldn't hear that she was saying, look, we're not right for each other. I was like, no, I'll go on another course, I'll do this, I'll do that, and I'll change myself. And we were just different, and that was, and eventually you realise. And actually I read a great book called The 7 Levels of Intimacy by a guy called Matthew Kelly, and I actually saw that she was right, and I was just deluded that I was hanging in there because I couldn't face up to being alone, what that would mean, the stigma of being divorced, and then also I didn't like to fail at anything, and that D word was like the C word, it's like I didn't want to face it, and and then after my divorce I actually spent a couple of years really finding myself, and it was not easier, when you're in your 40s, but you know what, it was incredible. And out of that I realised the kind of person I wanted, and I wrote down all the things and all the characteristics I wanted. I seen that on a seminar, and a friend of mine, Giovanni, and we sat in a restaurant in Cardiff one day. We wrote down all those characteristics, and I put them away. And it's one of those things where it says that, you know about manifestation.
Yes.
I was not sure if I fully believed it, but I thought, let me do it.
Yeah.
And when I met Anita, and many months after, I remembered I'd written this list, and I found it again, and all those characteristics were there in Anita. You know, so anyway, I believe it.
Because many of us will hold that, you know, how do I put it, that I want that guarantee, you know, that if I do this journey, and, you know, and I always say to them, look, you can have an expectation, but you can only hold an expectation for yourself.
Yeah.
And who you're showing up and who you want to be you. Because ultimately, if you're waiting for the other person to check, that may not come. And you may find that one of you grows and the other may not. So, you know, and that's something you're going to be faced with even in your married life, where if you're stagnating in your marriage, it could be that one person genuinely wants to go and the other one is scared and trying to hold you back. So I guess it's how to bring them both on that journey together and be aligned always. There will be moments, of course, where you have conflict, as you referred to. How would you say to them, or how could couples overcome conflict in the modern way?
Well, firstly, I think that some relationships are challenged in that one person may want to have a great relationship and the other one thinks that everything is actually fine. And it takes, like they say, two to tango, but one to redirect the dance. So if you're absolutely up for having a look at how you could be responsible for starting that transformation in your relationship, and start trying to do things differently and try out new things, read books and go to seminars. And YouTube is a great place for you to find out this. There's so much advice, good advice actually on YouTube, where you can find how to have that relationship. But definitely try first yourself to do something. That's the first thing. So your question, could you just...
Yeah, it was more of, if you are going through conflict with your partner, like we talked about earlier, it's having awareness, you need to now change or modify the way you're approaching it with each other. Is there something else that they could be doing to almost not even get to that point of conflict? So, for example, is it the way we voice things or way we say things? Because again, people tiptoe around each other and not really say what it. Like you say that with me. Just say it as it is. What is the key thing in the argument that you're actually arguing over? Because you actually find probably the real argument isn't about the argument. It's about the way you're communicating it, right?
Yeah, I mean, usually that's the trigger. You've stacked things in your head, you've piled it up, you're now waiting for something to trigger that, and then you can pile that on. And I think in terms of, I think it's self-awareness. The only way the only way that I think that you can really deal with some of this stuff is having self-awareness. If you know what you're doing and can reflect and then make changes, then I think you've got the ability to move that relationship forward. If you are not aware, you're the ego, or you're just oblivious to this, it's very difficult, I think. So if one party gets that awareness, the other party doesn't, I think unless you compromise in some shape or form, you will see huge conflict. And it happens quite a bit in relationships. So, and every relationship will be different. I mean, we've experienced one couple that have come to our seminars where the husband in that relationship has recognized after many years the way that he has been in that relationship, and actually openly confessed to that in front of 20 people. Wow. And hats off to him. He saw the way that he was behaving wasn't going to give him what he wanted. He realized what he actually wanted and then made that public declaration. And you can see the transformation in him is incredible. But not everyone, unfortunately, can do that. I think once you can do that, you see then where you can go. You then navigate yourself towards it. And that's what we're passionate about. We're not going to get everybody to come to our seminars, but those that want to and see there's possibility, there's another level, then they'll come.
And how important is it, Anita, that they kind of wipe the slate clean? I almost say, get rid of the negative emotions, that past relationship that you had with each other, because what often happens is people take that baggage along and they carry on the arguments that are probably 20 years old, and either take them on to the next relationship or they continue on with them with their journey with the same partner.
Well, like you're saying, it's about hearing each other and the way in which you communicate with each other. So you do, you may not be able to resolve absolutely everything. That's the honest truth. You can't resolve everything, but at least you can respect each other and understand that you may have different and opposing views, and that's okay to agree to accept that. So, things like listening to each other very carefully. I mean, even we struggle with that sometimes. You can be so reactive, within a second or a nanosecond you'll respond. And one of the techniques we teach is zip it. So it gives you, say, a 10-second, zip it, like, is it worth the response? And that gives you the time just to think and consider what you're going to say, so that you say it in kindness, and it's helpful to reaching a resolution. So it's just some of the ways in which you can do that. But of course, you can't absolutely solve every problem that you may have.
Can I add that? I think just reflecting when you were talking, is that what we've done is where we've had strong views about things that were different. I think we stayed open to seeing the other person's point of view. So I've seen things that maybe I thought was this way, but I didn't get stuck. I didn't go, right, I'm not changing my mind. I'm not going to be told I'm wrong here. I stayed open to that, and I've moved sometimes towards your point of view. And similarly, you've had so I've had viewpoints, and we've had strong or disagreements or whatever about that, but you've stayed open to it, and you've moved towards me. So I think we've seen that where you're able to just reflect and not just go, right, I'm not going to ever give in to that. You then even sometimes forget to think clearly. You just go, I'm not going to listen to you anymore, and that's going to be damaging in a relationship.
Yeah. Do you kind of feel that it's, the relationship you have, is that something now that your children are kind of like more in tune with as well, when they can see the way you two are being around each other, where you're communicating? How much of an impact is that having, would you say, now on shaping your children's future?
I think it has a huge impact now, in terms of the way they see us, say, how not to be in a relationship and how to be in a relationship. So I think it's by modelling it, by being, and also being absolutely true to who you are, and totally respecting yourself in all of that, and respecting each other. I think through that they see everything, and they'll grow up hopefully selecting the right person for their long-term relationship, because if you're in it for the long haul, then you need to spend time and nurture that relationship. So I absolutely think that
I mean, for the girls, hopefully we're showing them what they should be expecting from, and I'm talking about maybe myself here a little bit, but what they should be expecting from their husband. And when I give them that little bit of coaching sometimes, I say, don't settle. Make sure you should not need to try hard in a relationship. You should be chasing somebody. It should feel relatively easy in a relationship. If it's hard work, chances are there's a problem here. And our son is in a long-term relationship, and I think him and his girlfriend, I think definitely they're living with us, and I think over this period they've started to model some of our behaviours, because if they're living with us, who you hang around with, who you associate with, is who you become. And if we're being strong, positive role models, I mean, we're very blessed and fortunate that when they have disagreements and issues and challenges, they'll come to us for support, and we feel honoured and privileged that our children are able to do that, because they feel safe with us. They know that we're not going to judge them, that we're going to give them great advice as well. So it's good.
So Anita, I'm going to come to you first, because as time's moving on. If you could give our viewers some tips in terms of how do they daily nourish their relationship or start to heal, what would you say from a woman's perspective that she could do?
Okay, the first thing is absolutely try and make the first move wherever you can, because often women find it harder to make the first move, and especially when it comes to romance, as my husband tells me sometimes.
But did you make the first move in your relationship, can I just ask?
In our relationship, not really. I think I'm slower at making the first move always. Avnish is, I think I'm probably a little bit traditional in that way. I like him to make the first move, but I do recognise that in me, and I do, do try and
you do. I mean,
balance that out slightly. But so one of the things that I think is really good to connect on a daily basis, is a very useful tip, is to do the launch and landing, and we love this one. This is so important. It really does nourish you as a human being. You need to be hugged, and why not be hugged by your partner, your husband, that's where you'll get your absolute joy, I think. And one of the things that we practice is launch and landing every morning. And what we do is before partying or going off, for the day, before we go off to work or anything we might be doing for the day, and we'll hug each other for 20 seconds. I think if
we don't count it.
We don't count it. We just hug. We just ensure it could be long
hug, basically. Yeah,
a really long hug, and
so not just a quick. Right, I'm going.
But it's actually taking the time to
make each other feel valued. Yeah.
And reconnect at the end of the day. So ensure that we absolutely find each other. So we don't just say come through the door and ignore each other. We stop what we're doing and find each other and hug again for 20 seconds and ask about each other's day. It could be just a simple question like, how was your day? And knowing what your partner's day is like is really important as well, and ensuring that connection. And one other last thing I'd like to say is a very simple tip you can do is to stay connected in the day is to text each other. Send each other some text messages.
And use the modern technology to support
absolutely, to do that.
And Avnish, just for yourself as well, any final tips to add just before we wrap up?
I think it's just remembering, like every day, I think of things, and it's not difficult. Just think of things to be grateful for in your partner. Not to look for faults, not to, the dinner wasn't warm enough, or this wasn't right, or that, because you can pick anything you like.
Yeah.
But actually just be grateful. And there's so many things, like, I just live in that world of gratitude. It's so much nicer to be there.
Yeah.
And the other person then just, feeds off that positive energy. So just find nice things to say, leave notes every so often, and maybe it's not difficult with Anita because I'm just crazily in love with her and she's just so easy to be with, and I can moan to her about stuff and she has the capacity to hear it without blowing up, and I can have a moan about something and she'll hear it rather than sort of fire back. So but I think that's a two-way thing, but just being grateful, I think. Just being happy and look for the positive.
Well, thank you so much to both of you for joining me today. It's been an absolute joy and pleasure. I've loved listening to both your journey coming together and just some of the tips that I hope you've given to our viewers.
And hopefully they've been useful. And thank you for having us here.
Yes, thank you.
So if you want to follow Avnish and Anita, you can do so. They're on Facebook, they're on Twitter, they're on Instagram, they're on all the social media. I'm sure you will find them. Just Google them. And all that's left for me to say is please join me again next week. I hope you've really enjoyed the show as much as I have with my guest. So thank you very much. Sat Sri Akal ji.
Thank you.